For everyone participating remotely, please make sure that your microphone is muted. Do not unmute it until um, we get to the point where you are going to be speaking. That includes, I know there are a few PGW witnesses who had to appear remotely. And this applies also for members of the public. You will have the opportunity to speak once we get through the initial part of this hearing. Please keep your microphone muted throughout until such time as you are up to speak. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Philadelphia Gas Commission's public hearing in regards to PGW's FY 2027 operating budget. We do have an agenda that has been established for moving through this. As I just indicated, once we get through this agenda, we will open it up for comments from the public. We have received some written comments. If you submitted a written comment to the address provided on the commission's website by 5 p.m. last night, your comment has been received and noted and will be included in the record. Members of the public who wish to offer comments either remotely or here in the room will have the opportunity to do so. Please note that you will have 3 minutes in which to speak. So please be mindful of that 3-minute time limit. Are there any matters? I know we need to swear in the witnesses for both parties, but before we get to that point, is there anything before we get started with this hearing from the public advocate?
I don't believe so, although I just want to note that I do have a few general questions that would precede the subject matters identified in the agenda. We can, whenever we get to my opportunity to cross, we can go through those. There's not a lot, just a few.
Okay. Anything from PGW?
Nothing from PGW, thank you.
Okay, thank you. One more thing before we actually get started. For the members of the public participating in person and remotely, we do have a court reporter here present. You will need to identify yourself, giving your full name. If you are participating remotely, I already see a few names that you don't have your full name listed. Please make sure that your full name, first and last name, are listed in, if you're a remote participant, because we are, recording everyone not recording, but we want to make note of everyone who does speak during this, because again, all testimony is being considered. So remote participants, if you can please update your name in the Teams link, that would be appreciated. And at this point, I will turn it over to our wonderful court reporter, Sue McGatz, to swear in the witnesses from the Public Advocate and PGW. PGW, if you could identify everyone that is appearing in the conference room right now. I know that Raquel Guzman will be testifying. I'm not sure if there's anyone else in the conference room who will actually be testifying, but. PGW conference room. Okay, we know that is Raquel the only person from PGW that will be testifying remotely? Okay, so we'll get the other names. Raquel's the only one testifying remotely.
I will also be testifying remotely, Melissa Ostroff.
And you are from?
Earthworks.
Ms. Ostroff, you're a member of the public. When that time comes, we will call on members of the public. We're swearing in people who are testifying for the Public Advocate and PGW. Your turn to speak will come towards the end of this hearing.
Understood.
This morning, we'll have testimony from Daniel Cassidy, Raquel Guzman, Kevin Grooms, Tony Jenkins, Anthony Jenkins, I'm sorry, Joanne Kelly, and Bernard Cummings. And Mr. Gallagher, yes, thank you, William Gallagher.
Thank you. Now we are going to go ahead and get into the agenda. First up on the agenda is PGW's Gas Processing Department. Mr. Cassidy from PGW will be offering testimony at this point. We can start with Mr. Desant, and then once they're finished with their testimony, feel free to begin your cross.
Morning, thank you, Ms. McClendon. Good morning, Mr. Cassidy.
Morning.
Mr. Cassidy, I'm going to speak at the outset about the LNG feed study. Mr. Morgan makes an adjustment related to budgeted expenditures for the feed studies in the FY operating budget, in the fiscal 27 operating budget, which will result in a $4 million reduction in the operating budget. Do you agree with this adjustment?
No.
Can you explain?
So the $4 million is required to complete the feed study work that we need to get a more accurate price. Just for reference, the feed study stands for Front-End Engineering and Design Study. The study will be used to provide more project detail and accurate costs for the LNG liquefier project.
Why is the feed study important?
So the feed study is required to finalize scope, design, and cost of the LNG project. It will also include equipment specifications and regulatory requirements, evaluation as part of that study.
Has this issue of the feed study and funding for it been raised previously?
Yes, in the operating budget from 2025.
Need for the feed study changed?
No. So the substantive need is still basically the same.
Didn't we talk about the budgeted costs for a feed study in the FY 25 operating budget proceeding?
We did. We determined that each feed study could cost up to $2 million.
Has a feed study been proposed or the expenditure in the FY 27 operating budget?
It has been.
And has the cost changed?
The cost per feed study has not changed, but the concept of doing more than one feed study has changed. So what we propose is to have multiple vendors, likely two, if we have two $2 million feed studies. They will submit a lump sum turnkey cost at the end of the feed study for the new liquefier. Again, the feed study's front-end engineering and design. Multiple vendors will provide PGW with details and costs, competitive costs that can be compared to ensure that PGW is getting the best product at a fair price. In addition to just the liquefaction system engineering during the study, vendors will define construction and permitting details as part of this. They'll provide firm quotes for equipment, and any contingencies arising from the study will be included in a lump sum cost that the vendors will provide. So in short, the outcome of the feed study process will be a lump sum turnkey cost that can be part of a not to exceed contract.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. That's all I have.
Mr. Ballinger, I was waiting. I saw you were taking notes, so.
Thank you. I actually wanted to talk, as I mentioned, not directly about the feed study to begin, and so it may be more appropriate for Mr. Gallagher to help me out with some of these questions, because I wanted to just talk a little bit about the run up to this hearing, and just flag that we just heard a revelation from Mr. Cassidy that was about the feed study, which we'll get into. But just by way of background, we issued our discovery the first set on May 27th, and then we had the first ID meeting on June 1st. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I do actually think it would be helpful for a witness to answer the questions. So at that first ID meeting, we had issued a number of questions for discovery responses. And we specifically talked about PGW providing the written responses the week of the ID meeting, which ended on June 5th. Do you recall that discussion?
Yes.
And do you recall the reason why we asked for the discovery by June 5th? Because our deadline was June 8th. Okay. But we didn't receive the discovery until the afternoon of June 8th, meaning that we didn't have any opportunity to do any follow-up written discovery. Is that your understanding?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
So, and just to sort of tie this up, I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge on the record that instead of doing follow-up written discovery, we had a virtual meeting on June 16th to try to address some of the open questions that Mr. Morgan had at that time.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. And we appreciate you being available for that. And I just wanted to get that process on the record because I don't know that the hearing examiners were aware of that. And I wanted to make sure that we understood that from our perspective, this has been a very rushed proceeding and has not accommodated the usual need for discovery that we have. So with that, I will turn to the feed study. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher.
So the record's full. We also tried to accommodate you when you expressed an interest in a more fulsome discussion on certain issues, and we made Mr. Gallagher available for that purpose. Thank you.
And that was the June 16th meeting that we just discussed.
For the record, I think we did answer.
Yes, yeah, there's one that we'll visit again a little later. So regarding the feed study, at the May meeting, the commission suggested it would provide $4 million for PGW's front-end engineering and design feed study for the Richmond LNG project. Is that correct?
That is true.
Better for the witnesses to answer. And based on some conversations we've had outside the hearing room, namely the June 16th meeting, my understanding was that the $4 million is what PGW identified as the anticipated cost of the study, or as we've just heard, studies. Is that correct?
That's correct.
During our ID session, I asked about the $4 million, and PGW expressed some uncertainty about how the commission came up with that number, but then referred to the testimony as the source of that information. Do you remember that conversation? Might have been Mr. Patel who was speaking to that point.
I'm supposed to speak now. Okay,
You
fine.
brought the
Yeah.
witnesses you brought.
Okay, fine. The $4 million, I can't tell you how that was determined by the commission. I can tell you in the filing, Mr. Cassidy established that number and he gave you the walkthrough of how it evolved to the 4 million.
What I'm trying to get at is how the commission knew in advance of the filing of PGW's $4 million budget request. Do you have any information that would help me understand how the commission came up with that number?
We have nothing to offer on the record, no.
Anything off the record?
Even off the record, I have nothing to offer.
So it's just a pure coincidence that the commission determined that $4 million should be added to PGW's budget for a feed study that had not been filed or requested yet.
Just ask the commission that question.
During the ID meeting, PGW said that it had had conversations with consultants and constructors about the potential cost of the feed study. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And at that time, didn't PGW state that it should expect between 2 million and 4 million for the singular feed study?
We estimated between 2 and 4 million for feed studies. I don't think we specified singular. In 2025, we estimated one study at 2 million.
And what I'm getting at is that during the ID meeting, this was referred to as a feed study by PGW. It was not referred to as two feed studies. Is that correct?
I don't recall saying that.
My recollection, I'll just see if I can pull up the transcript. So on page 1 of the transcript says, and I quote, "We had 4 million for the feed study for the LNG." And what I'm understanding now is that you're saying there are two studies, which has not been previously discussed.
Just for the record, Mr. Ballinger, if I recall, there was no transcribed record for that proceeding. This is something electronic or AI derived? Just
It
to
says
be,
feed study again in the singular on page 6 of the AI transcript, again on page 7 of the AI transcript, again on page 61 of the AI transcript. Multiple occasions it said it uses the singular for feed study. Our belief that PGW was budgeting for a single feed study in this proceeding. That
also for the record, we did not review and edit the AI derived transcript, but you know, we're listening to you and it says what it says.
well, that's all we have on the feed study. It over to right, and
And we can
The-
move
the
to,
next
that's
issue.
the next
Yeah.
issue on the agenda.
So is there anything on the environmental study?
We have no questions on that.
Okay, do you have any questions for PGW on the environmental study, since they are listed out kind of separately in the agenda?
yes, we do have some questions about the environmental study.
Are you okay with him proceeding with his questions for your
Absolutely.
witness? Okay.
Okay. So Mr. Morgan testified that the goal of the environmental study remained unclear even after review of staff's response to OBID2. Do you agree with that the goal is somewhat unclear?
Yes, I do.
You agree that the commission, in announcing its expectation that PGW would include 1 million in its operating budget for an environmental study, did not provide guidance as to how such study should be performed.
So PGW was directed by commission to include this in the budget, and we have included it.
I'm going to ask you some questions, and if you're not familiar with environmental impact studies, that's fine. You don't need to get into it if so, but would you agree generally that an environmental impact study is a planning tool?
I'm going to refer to your lead in here, Rob, and say that I am not familiar with what is with environmental study expected here.
Would it be reasonable to conclude that an environmental impact study attempts to determine the environmental impact of a project before it's undertaken?
Yeah, I am not sure what the expectation of this is at this point.
So my guess is again that you wouldn't have a knowledge as to whether or not an environmental impact study would be intended to determine whether the LNG project is consistent with climate policy. Correct?
That's correct.
But would you have an opinion as to whether results of an environmental impact study would be necessary and crucial determining those sort of questions about whether the project is consistent with the city's climate goals.
Yeah, that's not my expertise. I just, I know that the feed study portion that we've talked about is required.
Mr. Morgan references the International Association for Impact Assessment in his testimony. Are you familiar with that association?
I am not.
Are you familiar with any other entities or organizations that propound best practice principles for environmental impact studies?
I would refer to our environmental group for that information.
Don't have someone here today who could answer those questions.
Unfortunately not.
One second. That's all we have on the environmental study.
Just in terms of, at least especially discussing the environmental study, because that was a directive that came from the commissioners, you know, and we did seek guidance from them on what they were expecting. I don't know that it would be an issue for us to go back to them and confirm that they, to confirm the expectations for the standards of the study. I don't know that that's, it doesn't seem that just getting clarification from the commissioners about what their expectations of this study are. It's not a problem from the hearing examiner's perspective. I'm not sure that that clarification would be a problem to PGW just to have the commissioners, because again, this was a directive from them. To get that clarification from them on what their expectations are of it. Does PGW have an objection to getting that clarification?
None at all.
Okay. Mr. Ballinger, would getting that clarification at least satisfy that portion of your argument? I understand that there's more to it than that, but because it came from the commissioners, we feel like at least that part, we can at least settle that part, provide the clarification, whether or not you still agree with the dollar amounts or whatever, again, but.
We have no understanding of what the basis for the dollar amounts are.
Well, and again, acknowledging that, but we can at least get clarification of the standards that they expect.
So Mr. Morgan's testimony was the recommendation that this be approved on a conditional basis. I believe that the proposal to get more clarification and to come back is actually quite consistent with Mr. Morgan's recommendation here. And so we would maintain that this is a conditional adjustment to PGW's budget. At this point in time, you know, we have exhausted discovery. We're in the hearing room. We've filed our testimony. Suggestion to go back to the commissioners and get clarification, I think is a valuable one. I think it's one that we certainly should have clarification if PGW is going to undertake this impact assessment. That said, pending that clarification and that detailed response, we don't believe PGW should be able to move forward until there's a further release of conditional funding for this line item. And I don't know what PGW's position is here today on Mr. Morgan's adjustment. But prior to this hearing, we've not reached any agreement on any of his adjustments.
And again, I'm not suggesting that, as I said, you know, I think that you're and understanding that part of your argument is the conditional funding until there is clarification. But, you know, again, I think that in terms of knowing exactly what the commissioner's expectations are of the outcome of this study, as I'm thinking about it, it's less of a PGW. That part of it is less of a PGW issue and more of a commission. Let's clear up what their expectations are. Looking at our schedule, briefs are due by July 1st. If we can have a response, that clarification from the commissioners by, let's say, the end of this week, would that be satisfactory? And again, I'm not suggesting that it takes your arguments off of the table, but the hearing examiners will endeavor to at least handle that part of it that is the commission's responsibility. It doesn't alter your other arguments. It's just that piece.
It just puts us in a sort of an awkward position, having submitted testimony on the record, to have information coming in, extra record information coming in.
I mean,
This
it can
late
be a
stage.
TR, it can be a TR request. Just as we made it, the initial question to the commissioners and ID request, this can, I know it's not our normal process, but it can be a TR request to the commission, just like we direct TR requests to the advocate and PGW. Let's just make this a TR request to the commission. We will endeavor to have a response to you by close of business Friday. The sooner, the better. And again, I don't think that it's just getting that extra clarification that seems to be necessary and, probably for all sides at this point. And it's the commission's responsibility, not necessarily, PGW's. This directive came down from the commissioners during the May meeting.
And just, it is, to call it unusual is sort of an understatement. And, I think from my perspective, the commission's directive to PGW, it sort of came from thin air. And I believe the commission would be well within its powers and authority to fund an environmental impact study if it felt that was necessary, rather than direct PGW to do it. And it puts PGW in the position of spending ratepayer funds, which would be the same as the commission, but without the guidance for what the commission seeks. So just sort of noting that awkwardness for the record. If the commission and the hearing examiners can provide some additional clarification, we will certainly take it up in the brief and consider that information for purposes of our final landing point in the brief.
Okay, so we will make that TR1 directed to the commission. Please provide further clarification related to the commission ordered environmental impact study, including, we'll formulate the language after this, but referencing the best standards, best practices, and things of that nature. Again, I think that bit of clarification, any other objections that the advocate may have, or, even PGW may have, who knows what the briefs are going to show. I think that it seems like that piece, we can at least get that taken care of, answering those questions so that everyone is on the same page in terms of what the commission's expectations are for that study. So again, we will endeavor to get that by close of business Friday, hopefully sooner rather than later. As I said, we will send out the finalized language for the TR at the conclusion of this hearing, but that will be TR1 directed to the commission itself. Is there anything else on the environmental study? Ballinger?
Nothing further from the advocate.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy and Mr. Gallagher. Next on the agenda is legal with Raquel Guzman, who will be testifying virtually. Ms. Guzman, I think I see you. I'm so far away from the screen. I believe that I see you.
Yes, good morning, Ms. McClendon.
Mr. Desant, you can proceed.
I'm sorry, Raquel. Good morning
Yes.
again. Let me
Good
restart.
morning.
Hearing what I said in the hearing room.
No, I'm
Mr.
sorry, I did not.
Mr. Morgan makes an adjustment to special legal expense, reducing expenditures that are planned for the next fiscal year by 1.623 million. Do you agree with this adjustment?
No, I do not.
Could you explain?
So there's sort of a general reason why I don't agree, and then there's a more specific reason why I don't agree. More generally, and this has come up in past years and past budgets, it's generally the case that with respect to litigated matters in particular, but general matters, regulatory matters, et cetera, it's sometimes hard to predict exactly what the amount of expenditure needs to be to cover the types of matters that are presented to PGW. Litigation is unpredictable, and in some cases, regulatory work is unpredictable. But in general, there has to be some kind of leeway in order to be able to address those needs immediately, which is typically what happens. More specifically, I disagree with the adjustment for two line items in particular. One, there was a special projects line item that was in fact not tapped last year, but is now quite ready to be tapped in the coming fiscal year. We have let an RFP for the assistance of outside counsel, and we are about to let another RFP for the assistance of outside counsels with respect to real estate matters. And so I fully expect that those contracts will be activated this year and will most likely result in expenditures in the budget category, which was 800,000 last year, was not spent to date, although there could be some expense this year, but will be spent most likely in fiscal year 27. With respect to another line item, which is the rate case regulatory, that is typically charged in another category. This year it's in this category and it will be charged through special legal budget. So at least with respect to those two, I think they make up the bulk of what I would think is the objection by Mr. Morgan. And in general, there are additional matters that we expect may have more traction this year that require additional budget funding. So I do disagree with that for those specific reasons and for the general reason that this type of spend is very volatile, hard to predict, and must be available on a moment's notice when we have matters that confront the company.
Ms. Guzman, Mr. Morgan's adjustment looks backward in time for an averaging over the last 4 years. What specifically do you see is happening in the next fiscal year that's really triggering or driving these expenditures that are being increased?
Well, as I noted, the special projects that we're working on are likely to come to fruition and be ready for the assistance of outside counsel in the coming year. So, for example, we are working on projects involving hydrogen, involving RNG, some of our other renewable gas and other types of projects, and those things will need the assistance of specialty counsel.
We ever look to averages or historical trends in setting a budget for the next year with special legal?
I think we take into consideration what costs have been. We don't do it in such a mechanized way. We really look to see what our matters have been, how much legal work we have done, and then we move forward with some estimate and some sense of what is going to happen in the year ahead. But as I mentioned, is very difficult because, again, litigation often comes out of the blue. And regulatory matters are not within our control, but we do have to respond to them. And we deal with regulatory matters, as you know, in several fora, FERC, all types of regulatory situations. So there are many generators of that work, and they're not within PGW.
Thank you, Ms. Guzman. That's all I have.
Good morning, Ms. Guzman.
Good morning.
We've spoken about your budget, in particular the special legal budget, a few times before, but I don't think I've ever directly asked you about what resources you rely upon. So aside from others at PGW, for example, in Mr. Gallagher's department, what resources do you use to develop your special legal budget?
So we obviously look to see what we have spent. We look to see what the projects are. We meet with clients to see what their upcoming business needs might be. We're certainly very involved in the regulatory arena, so we look to estimate what potentially, for example, what rate cases might come up in the federal arena. We look to see what types of pending regulatory matters have been raised in various legislative bodies to see whether that's going to need a formalized response. We do all of that essentially in-house.
Yeah, and that's helpful. I think I had a different sort of meaning in mind. I guess what I was driving at was whether there were any best practice resources for a general counsel to use in budgeting that you were aware of.
So I'm sure that there are for very specific practice areas. You have to remember that we have an entire in-house law firm. We cover every matter that touches PGW. So, I think that you would have to, could you get the assistance of consultants and pay them to tell us what best practices might be for, say, a collections practice or for this practice or that practice? I suppose we could. We, as you know, are on a pretty thin budget. We're very good at our spend. We cut costs whenever possible. And, given the breadth of the work that we do, that doesn't seem that would be a cost-effective use. I'd rather spend the money when we need it and spend it cheaply than engage consultants to tell us what we should be spending that I don't think in the end would have very much relevance as to what we end up actually spending.
Before you proceed, please, we received a comment from remote participants that they're having a hard time hearing people in the room. So if you could, I know it's awkward to be on top of the mic, but please be on top of the mic so
Will do.
our virtual participants can hear.
Yeah, I'm hoping you
I
can hear me.
think, well, Raquel, I think you're okay. It's more for us in the room.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll try to speak right into the microphone. When you prepared your special legal budget, you estimated how much you would spend in the current fiscal year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you estimated you'd spend 100,000 on PGC and local regulatory, and 50,000 on taxes and revenues, and we could go down the list and identify all of those estimates, right?
We could, but again, those are estimates, and we're still several months to go in the end of our fiscal year. So, the actual by the end of the year may very much differ from that.
Could you explain how you derived the estimates?
We looked to see what had already been spent. We ballparked what we thought we might spend in matters that we're currently aware of, and that is how we come up with those numbers. Again, that there is no way of knowing what's going to come up in those categories with any degree of certainty. Those are evolving daily. We get served, for matters in an unpredictable fashion. And, this is our best guess. It is, again, an estimate. It's a budget, it's an estimate. And that's the process, Rob.
I believe earlier when we were talking, Mr. Desant was talking to you about the miscellaneous special projects line.
Yep.
You stated there could be some expense this year,
Mhm.
but you
So
have
we-
$100,000 shows up as estimated expense this year.
Okay. So if I could explain that, and again, these are dated numbers. This is a number that was produced by us. Mr. Gallagher could probably tell you the date that this is actually filed, but as of the date that was filed, I anticipated we would be spending in that ballpark by the end of this fiscal. I think it is possible we will spend less. Again, we're about to award an RFP that's already been let. So we're going to start assigning work under that contract within the next several weeks. And depending on how quickly or not the need for that outside counsel arises, we could get to 100. We could get to less. I'm always hoping for less.
And just perhaps a little off topic, but when PGW awards the RFP, you still have to go through the contract process and get a conformed contract, correct?
We don't conform contracts. Our office handles the contracting. So, that process can be very much sped up here.
Good to know. And I just wanted to understand within the general transactional miscellaneous special projects proposed budget, is that where you're accounting for potential legal work associated with the Richmond project?
For that project and various other projects.
So that's so if I understand it correctly, then that line item is not for one specific project. It's sort of a catch-all for special projects that may come up.
Correct, miscellaneous special projects.
So again, so that's not based on a particular hourly rate of any provider or any particular maximum spend so that you would negotiate in a contract. It's just it's more or less a placeholder for those projects for legal work.
I can't disagree with that, Rob. That's right.
But where you have other expenditures that are grouped, for example, by environmental or employment, you have the specific providers lined up for those representation. Is that correct?
Yes, provided we are not RFPing them this year. So
Okay.
as you know, as a matter of convenience, and also so that it's more easily understood, where there is a provider, or has been a provider, we generally list the provider by name. If we are in an RFP process, we generally don't. It goes both ways.
Okay. And going back to the special and miscellaneous projects, if I guess I'm trying to get a sense of the ordering of the process that would lead to expenditure. My assumption would be that you would first have to have acceptable financial terms for that transaction before you would engage, outside counsel to assist. Is that a fair assumption?
I'm sorry, which transaction? The contract with the legal
could-
provider or the?
No, I'm
which-
talking about the special miscellaneous special projects that what I'm trying to understand is whether you would engage the outside counsel sort of before or after you've negotiated the basic terms of the special project.
It could be either, for example, and I think you're aware of how our procurement processes work. We typically, depending on the nature of the project, would draft an RFP. On occasion, that RFP might have a full-blown contract attached to it as a requirement of the provider, or it may have terms and conditions before you even get to the issue of what the project is that they might be working on. So depending on the complexity of the project, we might engage outside counsel to help us with the RFP itself, especially if it's going to have full-blown contract terms that would be required of a vendor. We might do the RFP in-house, but then at the time of election or selection of the vendor, we might then have counsel work on that. It really depends on the nature of both our in-house capacity, the complexity of the project, and where in the process we think outside counsel would be most effective.
Okay. Mr. Desant put together a hearing exhibit, which I'll just refer to since I have it handy, which is hearing exhibit 3. And I'm just looking at, there are 3 line items I refer to them as line items. There are 3 entries or 3 categories of expense in special legal: toxic torts, landlord and other liens, and general litigation.
Mhm.
And Mr. Morgan shows that those have a 4-year average spend of $0 in all 3 categories.
Just for the record, you're referring to PGW Hearing Exhibit 3,
Yes.
which was also the schedule in Mr. Morgan's testimony, LKM FY25 OB1-7. Thank you.
And I just wanted to confirm that there's been 0 spend in those categories for the last 4 years.
So that's not correct. With respect to toxic torts, I think it is, there have been some minor expenditures, so I would need to double check our records to see where that is. With respect to landlord liens, that's certainly not the case. I think you're aware that we've been in litigation for some time now in various fora, dealing with the issue of landlord liens and their position under Pennsylvania law, as well as in a particular matter. So that is completely incorrect. That spend has certainly met the budgeted amount. What was the third category? I'm sorry, Rob, I don't recall. what you said.
General litigation.
In general litigation, we have not spent. That is a contract that we have in the event of a conflict. And also in the event that there is general litigation that comes upon us without much notice. We generally like to handle all litigation in-house. We have in-house litigators in various specialty practices, and they handle almost, I would say, 99% of our work, but there comes occasional circumstances where we need to make sure we have someone who's already been RFP'd, who's already been selected, who's ready to go at a moment's notice, and that's what that contract is for. Again, and I understand that this is somewhat at odds with Mr. Morgan's testimony, but the goal here for us is not to spend this money. The goal isn't to spend all of this money. The goal is to handle as much as we can in-house, but also be ready on a moment's notice to handle whatever matter pops up along the way. As you know, as an attorney, we have but so much time to respond to any type of summons or complaint or anything of that nature, and we cannot push those deadlines aside as we enter into an RFP process and as we work out budgeted amounts. We need to have money ready to go.
Okay, just 1 second. Let me consult with Mr. Morgan quickly. And that's all we have on special legal. Thank you, Ms. Guzman.
Thank you.
Is there any redirect from PGW on this?
No redirect, but I do have questions for Mr. Morgan.
Okay.
I might proceed. Good morning, Mr. Morgan. Always good to see you. Let me direct your attention to page 12 of your testimony. There you make an adjustment to special legal expense, reducing it by 1.623 million. Am I right?
Yes, you're correct.
And you made a similar adjustment in the fiscal 26 operating budget proceeding, didn't you?
That's correct.
And your adjustment in fiscal 26 was based on an average expenditure during the period fiscal years 22 through 24 for PGW. Isn't that true?
That is true.
In this case, the subject period was fiscal 22 through 25.
Correct.
And that's really the difference between the two proposals. They're substantively the same. Isn't that correct?
Essentially, conceptually, they are the same. The additional year was added to show that no additional expenditures were made.
Now, as I recall your adjustment from fiscal year 2026, it was rejected by the hearing officers and the commission. Isn't that true?
I believe that's accurate.
And your adjustment was rejected because in the recommended decision, they state PGW's special legal budget is based on specific factual circumstances that change from year to year, and unlike other expense areas, is not driven by historical spending and averages. Do you recall that?
I'll accept that subject to check.
And they go on to say that the advocate overlooks the hearing examiner's rejection of past recommendations, linked to the fact that he's consistently advocated the same position, albeit with methodological variations, that PGW's budget should conform as closely as possible to past actual and estimated actual spending. Isn't that true? Subject to check.
Subject to check.
But here we are again, Mr. Morgan. And as you just indicated, the adjustment is substantively unchanged. Isn't that correct?
I said conceptually it's about the same, but I think the point you're missing is that Ms. Guzman mentioned that in that line item for the special projects, there's things like the LNG project. Yet there's no indication of consideration for that legal advice or legal help that she would get. Point is that PGW has a habit of simply repeating what was presented the previous year. So if you're saying that I haven't changed my approach, is a reflection of PGW not changing its approach either.
If I'm correct, though, Ms. Guzman also indicated that, she needs the money, the authorization for projects like LNG or other things that have not happened before, authorized so she can proceed when the subject is raised. You did hear that, didn't you?
I heard that, but again, my point is she's aware that the LNG project is going on. There should be some adjustment to that line item to reflect the fact that monies are being spent on or expected to be spent on something that would have fallen in that category.
I think we'll agree to disagree because she also indicated that she needs to have the authority in place to proceed and that you can't predict with precision what's going to happen when your adversaries are driving the bus in so many circumstances and regulatory matters are determining what we must do. You did hear that.
I heard that, but here you're referencing a line item, or I should say, category that has never been. There's been no expenditures. So is unlike something that you have ongoing, where you can say, well, we have appropriated a certain amount of money for that proceeding or that legal matter. Like to keep what you've appropriated because you don't know what your adversary would do, that would make sense to me. But when you're talking about something that is essentially non-existent, it doesn't apply to me.
Right. Just to close this out, Mr. Morgan, if you refer to PGW Hearing Exhibit 3, that's from your testimony, a schedule that we just reproduced for purposes of this hearing.
That's correct.
If you look at the column 5, you see a 4-year average. Am I not correct?
That's correct.
And the 4-year average relates to a historic period. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And you're basically saying if you haven't spent it in the past, somehow or another you won't spend it in the future, despite the fact that with legislation, with litigation, with regulatory practices generally, things are always changing. You see the disconnect, sir?
You're
Looking at Hearing Exhibit 3, particularly column 5, you see a 4-year average presented for historic spending. Isn't that correct?
yes.
And that looks back to the period fiscal 2022, 23, 24, and 25. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there anything in there about 2027? So that has to be added by PGW Legal to assess what we need to have to be prepared for the future. Do you understand that point?
I understand that point.
That's really all I have, Mr. Morgan. I thank you as always for your time.
Okay, if there is nothing else on legal, we will turn next to risk management with Kevin Grooms and Ms. Guzman. Mr. Desant, you can proceed.
Thank you. Good morning again, Ms. Guzman. Mr. Morgan makes an adjustment related to expenditures for excess liability insurance in his budget recommendation. And he recommends conditional funding for this particular budget item. Do you agree with him?
I do not.
Could you explain?
Yeah, so as I think the commission and the public advocate understand, we do this on an annual basis. We procure insurance on an annual basis, and that is the process. The process that's utilized is a negotiation. So it is a sure thing that we will be purchasing this insurance. The only thing that is not sure is what the cost will be. And that is not unlike any number of contracts, if not dozens or hundreds or thousands of contracts that PGW needs to budget and are subject to a negotiation or a public procurement. So with respect to this, I feel no differently. We continue to need this money approved so that we have the ability to make that commitment when the time comes that that rate is negotiated.
Thank you, Ms. Guzman. That's really all I have.
Mr. Ballinger?
Sure, just a couple of questions, Ms. Guzman.
Mhm.
Or Mr. Grooms, whoever's best suited to answer. We discussed conditional spending adjustment in this area last year, and it was actually PGW's proposal or alternative proposal that conditional funding, to the extent necessary, would be released when PGW filed a letter indicating it had selected a provider and obtained a quote. Do you recall that?
I do recall that. Yep.
And that's what happened, correct? PGW filed a letter in late August.
I believe so. Yes.
It may have been Ms. Lamb who filed that letter, but PGW sent the letter and the funds were made available, correct?
That is correct.
And when we talked about excess liability insurance last year, PGW, I believe it was, again, Ms. Lamb, explained the process you use. And you just talked a little bit about this, the negotiation. But she described working with the mutuals to get the best deal. Is that still the process that's in place?
That is the process described last year is still the process. Yes,
So you identified coverage in the same way that we discussed last year, just to be clear.
that's right. That's correct.
That's all I have. Thank you.
We'll have some questions for Mr. Morgan on this. You may proceed. Good morning again, Mr. Morgan. Let me refer you to page 10 of your testimony, specifically line 16. And I can sort of read it to you, but I just wanted you to have it in front. Am I correct in stating that your recommendation regarding excess liability insurance is tied to the uncertainty related to projecting the cost of excess liability insurance coverage? That's the reason, isn't it?
Yes, that's the reason.
And because of this uncertainty, you suggest conditional funding is a way of protecting customer interests. I think your words are avoid a higher than necessary budget allotment. Am I right?
You're correct.
And am I also correct that your testimony is silent as to the proposed requirements for the release of conditional funding this time?
It's silent, but what I envision that would be done is to follow the same procedure used last year.
Now, subject to check, I picked up the recommended decision from last year, and there it stated, if you recall, funding shall be released upon PGW's notification by letter to the commission that it selected an insurance provider. The letter should be sent immediately upon the selection of the provider and should contain the name of the provider as well as the insurance provider and the rates proposed. Do you recall that in general, subject to check?
Subject to check.
I take it from our conversation in informal discovery that the same notice requirement will work, you propose in this context.
Yes.
And I take it you'd also acknowledge that notification, similar to last year, would be given after the fact, after the negotiations have actually concluded. Isn't that true?
My recommendation is that the same procedure used last year be.
But remember, the predicate for all of this is the uncertainty of the market. So the above notification does not really change anything. The dynamics haven't changed. The negotiation hasn't changed. We've given a notification after the fact. Isn't that true?
If I may, I mean, our recommendation last year would remain the same this year, that the notification identified the amount and that only the amount actually of expense incurred would be released. The missing one piece of what the discussion was last year, which was that PGW would only spend to the extent necessary. So I wanted to flag that. It's not just that the funds fully become available if the contract amount is lower.
I think what PGW is concerned is to what end are we doing all of this? Because the negotiations have already concluded. Mr. Morgan, would you agree as a general proposition that the budget is supposed to be a reasonable compilation of estimates or projections of future spending based upon the information known when the budget is compiled?
You look at the trends. That's something that was known. Response or discussion in the ID session, the witness essentially was unsure as far as what that amount will be. That's why I took the position I took.
And you also recognize this is a negotiation. So by its very nature, we don't know the outcome until it's completed.
And it's the same situation as the same circumstances as last year. And I'm just being consistent.
But the uncertainty that you're concerned about is like in this area, but in many areas of the budget. Isn't that true?
I disagree.
Every budget, we make assumptions. In every budget, we don't know with certainty the outcome. The only certainty is that it's likely to be different. And we make our best estimate based upon the information we have. We try to be transparent in making the estimate and telling you what market conditions may bring. And that's what we've done here, isn't it?
No, in this instance, the witness said that they were unsure as far as what the amount would be. That admission in itself tells me that I cannot rely on that amount. The other instances in the budget, no such assertion was made. So we can't say that just because the budget is comes up with an amount that could change, that size or is similar. Again, the witness in this instance admitted that it was sure that she was unsure what the amount would be. And so just that doubt tells me that the amount that was proposed was certain.
We also are making a transparent description to you of what market conditions are, what's driving the increase in cost, sharing that with the record because we're trying to reach a decision as to what a reasonable budget is. If that budget perhaps could be higher, we tell you that in advance. We're trying to get the lowest price possible, but I think you know that in the context of other adjustments that we make that you acquiesce to.
Not the only adjustment that I took this approach. Where PGW could substantiate that was included in the budget, I didn't take issue with it. Where PGW points to uncertainty, where PGW is unsure it would need. Other instances where I've adjusted to reflect certainty and the doubt.
Well, as you point out, excess liability insurance coverage isn't the only conditional funding adjustment that you advance. Let me refer you to PGW Hearing Exhibit 2. There you show all of your itemized exhibits. And tell me if you agree, more than half of the dollar amount of your proposed adjustments, or 15.1 million by your calculation, is tied to requests for conditional funding. Isn't that true?
I haven't done the percent. Just a minute.
Just to make it
Yes,
easier,
yes, I agree.
15 million
I agree.
compared to 9. Okay. And the bulk of the funding then of the funding request, the 11.715 million relates to IS expenditures. Isn't that true?
That's true.
Let me stop there because we will be getting to that point later. Thank you.
Is there anything else on the topic of excess liability from either the advocate or PGW?
Nothing further.
Okay, so then next we'll turn to environmental remediation.
Thank you, Mr. Grooms. I'll call Mr. Grooms next. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Mr. Morgan recommends conditional funding for expenditures related to environmental remediation at the 9th and Diamond site. Do you agree with his recommendation? It's for conditional funding again. Could you explain?
And please make sure that again, it's awkward, but speak directly into the mic so that the virtual participants can hear you clearly.
Will do. I'm afraid that microphone is no longer working. So to the question, this particular budget is associated with a project at our 9th and Diamond facility. That budget is one that I and PGW determined to be an upper limit ceiling for a worst case scenario that might come to fruition in the event that our current investigation shows a contaminant plume that is mobile and or volatile. And I budgeted on the upper limit in the event that the conditions are worst case scenario. I think it would be, from a regulatory standpoint, we have a requirement to be prepared to address a worst case scenario, and therefore that budget does reflect that. And from an ethical standpoint, we are also obligated to ensure that we are prepared to address a mobile and volatile contaminant plume to protect the those who would be impacted by that plume, particularly the residents of North Philadelphia who border the 9th and Diamond facility.
Thank you, Mr. Grooms. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grooms. And I'm going to ask a little bit about the informal discovery session. I believe it was, again, Ms. Lamb who provided some explanation, but hopefully you can confirm my understanding from that meeting. So during the informal discovery meeting on June 1st, PGW explained that it was actively investigating, but didn't really know whether and to what extent there was a problem requiring environmental remediation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is PGW still investigating at this point?
Yes, we are. We're in the subsurface investigation phase to attempt to delineate both the horizontal and the vertical extent of a contaminant plume in that location.
And is the timeline for the consultant study still about what was expected? I think Ms. Lamb said it would be done in 2 to 3 months at the time of the June meeting.
That's correct.
Ms. Lamb also said that the work you were going to do would be driven by the consultant's findings. Is that also correct?
That's correct. The consultant's findings and our review of those findings.
So until the consultant's work is done, PGW can't determine the exact scope of work that will be needed here, correct?
Correct.
Agencies due to minimal attrition, but we do have robust plans in place, and we're very confident that we'll be able to meet our headcount goal of 1,637.
Mr. Dinkins, would the public advocate's adjustment, if approved, have an adverse impact on PGW?
Yes, I believe it would have a significant adverse impact on PGW. We have a few plans that we need to implement in FY27, including the CIS going live for customer affairs and some activities with field services. So both are dependent upon us having our optimal headcount level in place. If the proposed plan were to be adjusted downward, that would significantly impact and impede our operating budget and our ability to be successful in implementing some of these critical projects.
Thank you, Mr. Dinkins. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Dinkins. Do you have PGW's response to PAOB1 in front of you or available to you? If not, I can actually share my screen here if that would be helpful. I just start there at the question, and I just want to confirm with you that the request we asked for was information from September 2024 through the most recent month available. Is that correct?
In 2025.
Fiscal 2025, which would be September 2024, correct? Okay, and we asked for it in Excel format, correct?
It does say that.
Okay, I'm going to turn to the PGW's response. And would you agree that PGW provided information for fiscal 2025 only and did not supply any information for fiscal 2026?
That's what's on the screen.
Okay. Would you also agree that it was not provided in Excel format, that this is a PDF?
I will assume that's correct because we're looking at it as a subject to check.
Okay. I would just like to ask for a transcript request for PGW to update the response to PAOB1 and provide the information for fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026 through May. I'm assuming May would be available in Excel format. Okay, and then Mr. Dinkins, I'm going to go to the bottom of the response here. I'm actually having to look at it myself. Thank you. Okay, so the bottom lines of the response show the total head count. And would you agree that PGW's head count fluctuates each month?
Yes, I would agree that it fluctuates monthly.
And would you agree that sometimes those fluctuations can represent a fairly significant percentage of employees?
I'd have to look at the calculation for percentage.
Okay.
I'm looking at just the numbers
Just
here.
the numbers. Okay, well, let's look at December and January. And if you look at those 2 months, you'll see that headcount declined by 40 full-time employees, correct? It went from 1628 to 1588. December and January.
Repeat the question, please.
Between December and January, PGW's full-time employee headcount went from 1628 to 1588. Is that correct?
Subject to check it.
You need me to scroll up. $16.28 there, and I'll scroll up to show that that's December. Okay. And then in the next month, 1588. So that's a decline of 40 employees, correct?
Correct.
And if we look sort of across the bottom line of PAOB1, would you agree PGW didn't fully recover those 40 full-time employees until August, when it retained 1628 full-time employees? That would be the last, the second to last column shown.
According to the document, subject to check, it is 1628. I can't see if that's in August or not. August.
Okay, thank you. So that took 8 months to recover those 40 full-time employees, correct?
Subject to check.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Is there any?
If I could do some follow-up. We were talking with Mr. Ballinger a few moments ago about the fluctuation in employee levels at the end of the fiscal year. At the end of the fiscal year, this one doesn't work, I see. Repeat the question, Mr. Dinkins. At the end of the fiscal year, Mr. Ballinger is pointing out, or the calendar year, Mr. Ballinger is pointing out there's a fluctuation in employees. And the numbers that you were looking at the end of a fiscal year, what are reasons for attrition?
At the end of the fiscal year, or in January, we would have most of our retirements take place during that period. So that would be the primary driver of that change or that reduction.
I have no recross.
Thank you, Mr. Dinkins. Next, we have Information Services with Ms. Joanne Kelly. I actually think both mics are working. When you were speaking into that other one, yeah,
Sometimes
it can
it
be,
seems
you
like
just,
it works.
again, you have to be on top of it, unfortunately.
I might proceed. Good morning, Mrs. Kelly. Mrs.
Morning.
Kelly. Good morning.
It's awkward, but yeah.
Good morning, Mrs. Kelly. How are you?
Good morning.
I'm going to direct your attention to Mr. Morgan's testimony. There, with respect to information services, he refers to an adjustment of 11.7 million in planned expenditures, which he wants treated on a conditional funding authorization basis. Do you agree with that?
I do not.
Could you explain?
The recommendation for these budgeted expenditures are routine and well within PGW's expertise based on prior budget and industry standards for costs. They have also been in prior years, but these expenditures have been in prior years' budgets, which have been approved by the Philadelphia Gas Commission.
Now, as I understand, there were two prongs to your critique of the adjustment. One was, well, let me frame it as an affirmative question. Are the estimated expenditures that are shown in PGW Hearing Exhibit 1 overstated in any way?
Yes, they are.
Could you explain?
So the total amount on page 12 of PA Statement 1 for the information services contains duplicative amounts and is overstated by $3,444,000.
In addition to that particular adjustment, well, can you explain the breakdown of the 3.44 million that you just spoke of?
Certainly. So the first item is under network and systems engineering under software subscriptions for the Microsoft Enterprise product suite. We are in the third year of that contract. And so that is $1.5 million is listed twice.
Okay, and just for clarity's sake, looking at PGW Hearing Exhibit 1, row 4 and row 5, you can see the $1.574 million number repeated in two occasions. Okay, I'm sorry.
Correct. The next item is for Island Enterprise Browser for $200,000. This is a new enterprise browser acquired in fiscal year 25 for security and data loss prevention. This amount is listed as the third year of that contract and is also listed twice. That is under network and systems engineering under software subscriptions.
There are any other items that are mentioned more than once?
There is. There is another item for SCW My Account software, regulatory intelligence for $1,400,000. The description, it's combining two items, two line items from our response. The SCW My Account software is part of the Smart CX subscription with SCW, and the regulatory intelligence software is provided by HData and used for energy regulation and utility compliance.
Taking all of these into account, the net number that you reported, 3.444 billion, is the reduction, assuming that you agree with the adjustment in the first place. Isn't that true?
Correct.
Now, is there any other basis you disagree with Mr. Morgan?
A lot of the other items in the table are business as usual routine expenditures for either end of life replacement equipment or just business as usual routine expenditures that were in prior budgets.
Do you care to be a little more specific for laptops, for example?
Sure. I can go into each item briefly if you like. The category under Network and Systems Engineering, under General Materials, there's a line item for 2 million for field laptops. Field laptops have reached end of life. We generally replace them every 4 years, and we are in our 4th year. So that is a general expenditure that we anticipate every 4 years. The other line item, the desktop, laptop, and nano line item in the same category is to replace aging desktop and laptops. And we draw upon that annually as needed. These are routine expenditures. The category of network and system engineering purchase services. This is for staff augmentation, and sometimes depending on project load, we may ramp up and add someone throughout the year, and this is also routine and have been in prior budgets. The category for non-IS department technology for translation services. This is an ongoing expense that's used by customer service for our English as a second language customers. It is a normal operating expenditure and has been in prior years' budgets. The network and system engineering under software subscriptions for VMware maintenance is required for ongoing support and to keep our virtual and server and desktops maintained. This is a normal operating expense and has been in prior years' budgets. The ActiveTrack is a workforce analytic and productivity management platform and is a normal operating expenditure and has been in prior years' budgets. The category under security control and software subscriptions for Palo Alto is a subscription that manages our firewalls to protect our employees utilizing internet access and to protect the PGW network from bad actors and malicious threats. It is a normal operating expenditure and has been in prior budgets. The last line. That's the last item.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, I'm gonna ask that you look with me, Ms. Kelly, at PGW's response to PAOB 22, and I can share my screen. This is the question here, and I'm just going to go through and look at this with you so I can see what it says. Just looking at the response to B, the question asked was, please provide support for the 2.4 million for network and system engineering under general material and explain the nature of the expenditure. In response, PGW says the 2.4 million total consists of the following: 2 million for field laptops, 200,000 for desktop laptop nano, and 200,000 for miscellaneous equipment peripherals and general material purchases. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the response then does not provide any support for the actual numbers that are shown there. For example, there is no indication of how many laptops and how much a laptop costs, nor is there an invoice or any other basis upon which to judge the reasonableness of $2 million for field laptops. Is that correct?
These are routine expenditures that were shown in prior budgets and approved.
And there's no way that someone reviewing this could recalculate PGW's budget based on known information. Is that correct?
We actually would disagree with that. Let me try to think. Let me object to the question, the way it was formed, because none of us are babes in the woods in terms of budget proceedings, having weathered 26 of them myself. And you're close to me, Mr. Ballinger, and Mr. Morgan isn't far behind in terms of the records that we have been presented, the documentation that's presented. For example, field laptops. They've been purchased, it was 4 years ago, but they were purchased in the past.
And the question was to provide support for the amount, not simply to reiterate the amount. And so what my understanding is that there, in budget proceedings, when we review budget proposals and ask questions about how PGW derived the number, we're provided with a response that tends to allow us to judge whether or not that's reasonable. And what I'm pointing out here is that the information provided to us in response to our request did not enable us to determine the reasonableness of the proposed expenditure. And so what I'm asking is just whether you would confirm that the only information PGW provided in response to the request for support is the itemized list of $2 million for field laptops, $200,000 for desktop laptop and nano, and $200,000 for miscellaneous equipment, peripheral, and general materials. That is the only information that was provided. Is that correct?
In addition to the
On
testimony
the
given
record
today.
of this proceeding, on the record of this proceeding prior to today,
Prior
that's
to
the only
today, you have
information.
to add
Okay.
that.
And that would be true with every response in this data request that requested support for a line item. It would be true that the only information provided was simply the dollar amount associated with the spends in that line item or in that category, and not the basis for the calculation of those. Is that correct as well?
Yes, again, these are routine expenditures that we budget for every year. These numbers are based on prior year's budgets and taking into consideration inflation.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Is there anything else from PGW?
Yes, just a few questions of Mr. Morgan.
Okay, before you get started, for those participating virtually, we want to acknowledge that unfortunately, the camera that is facing the audience, so PGW and the public advocate, has gone down. This has been an ongoing issue with the tech in this hearing room. We have been working over the last few months to try to get it fixed with the city's vendors. We just want to apologize. Hopefully, as everyone speaks closely into the mic, you can at least hear what's being said.
Thank you. With your permission, I'll proceed with Mr. Morgan. Good morning again, sir. I'm going to direct your attention to information services and your adjustment there. I'm going to direct your attention to PGW Hearing Exhibit 1, sir, and your testimony. On PGW Hearing Exhibit 1, based upon our conversations and informal discovery, you indicated that you saw certain redundancies. Isn't that true?
Question that I didn't add during that time.
Okay. And so the various items, whether it's the 1.574 million or the 1,400,000 for software, I think is software regulatory intelligence. Those two things sort of jumped out at us when we were talking about it before this hearing. Isn't that true?
That's true. I have to add, because this is a situation where some of these issues could have been worked out. My approach was to work earnestly to get answers. The phones that we're looking at.
I keep saying it to everybody, and I'm being so serious, and I get that it's awkward, but you see how close I am to this mic? This is how close everybody has to be to the mic. I mean, on top of it, so that the remote folks can be heard. So please, and make sure you're also kind of projecting your voice. We have limited control over how the tech in here works. We're not part of the contract, the setup and everything. So we have to take and work with the parameters that we have. And it's awkward. I get it. But please, so that our virtual participants can hear.
Understood. I just wanted to make a point in responding. The response that he refers me to was provided on the day that we had an opportunity to send follow-up to clarify issues. The ID session was canceled. So again, we didn't have an opportunity to clarify some of these issues. And then I had a discussion with Mr. Gallagher about these amounts, and essentially I was told we won't know the exact figures until there's an award, essentially. It doesn't matter if this is a routine purchase or routine acquisition. The point is, we are asked to review the budget and tell if it's reasonable. If PGW attempts to not respond, we can only recommend based on what they provide. And so with that, I had to get that out because this was very frustrating when working and put my testimony together.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. But my question was directed to the information that was brought to your attention today on the record as to the redundancies that you saw, and we're trying to confirm now, not to discredit your testimony, but to add clarification for the record, that the 3.44 million adjustment, subject to check, was a reasonable reduction in your overall recommendation.
I understand. Yes, I heard that.
That's all I have.
Is there anything else on this area?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay, thank you, Ms. Kelly. And next, we're going to turn to customer service with Bernard Cummings.
I can proceed, Ms. McClendon. Good morning, Mr. Cummings.
Good morning.
Almost afternoon. Mr. Morgan recommends an adjustment related to Research America, basically recommending conditional funding authorization for this expense. Do you agree with this recommendation?
No, I do not agree with the recommendation.
Can you explain why, sir?
This Research America is a routine operating expense that we have in customer affairs that we use on an annual basis, a particular vendor. One of the things that we did when we were developing the budget was we anticipated that we will probably try to change the vendor through an RFP process. And we are anticipating that there would be natural inflationary increases due to bringing on a new vendor through an RFP process.
I believe the adjustment is driven by the increase in expenditure. Tell me how you came about the increase that you estimate for budgeting purposes.
So we have had some past experience on some smaller type activity that is done in another area within customer affairs. And when we did that process, we saw the natural increase in the price of the service on a smaller scale for a smaller vendor. Also, this particular vendor, Research America, traditionally for a long time, it's my understanding, has been underpriced. And even they make, certain comments that certain functionality within our current agreement is becoming more expensive for them. So when we were thinking about doing the RFP process, we went through a process of saying, okay, if they're already tipping their hand that it's becoming a little expensive, let's anticipate that when we go through this process, that there's a good chance that it could be as high as what we put in the fiscal 27 budget proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. I have no cross.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a couple questions for Mr. Morgan. You made the trip, Mr. Morgan. I just want to talk to you as much as I can. We don't see you enough. Mr. Morgan, with reference to Mr. Cummings' testimony in customer service, your adjustment is stated in a summary chart, which at PGW Exhibit 2. There it states that Research America is an adjustment for conditional funding. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And it says on page 15, the narrative, words to the effect that it could be a reduction in the budget. And I just wanted to clarify for the record that it's a conditional funding adjustment.
It's a conditional funding adjustment.
All I have. Thank you.
Okay. Any follow-up from the advocate?
No need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So before we turn to the final item on the agenda, which is kind of our wrap up and review of everything, we are going to turn to the public comments. At the outset, I want to acknowledge the written comments that were received by the commission by 5 p.m. Close of business yesterday. If you offered comments in writing but are also participating virtually, I'm going to ask that you just allow your written comments that have been submitted to stand as your comments on this matter. There is another hearing that is scheduled to take place a little later on in this hearing room. We want to give virtual participants who did not submit anything in writing a chance to speak, as well as those who are physically present in the room a chance to speak. And so if you submitted a written comment, it has been received. We're going to acknowledge them now. Please allow that to stand as your commentary, what you submitted in writing. So we received comments from a Doris Lynch, a Melissa Ostroff representing Earthworks, Kristen Scalise, and Dr. Walter Sue. We will turn first to the members of the public who are looking to speak in the hearing room. I do have a list of names for people who previously signed up. We're going to call those folks first. If there's anyone else who has not had a chance to add their name to the list, we will get to you afterwards. As noted previously, you have 3 minutes in which to speak. Once that 3 minutes is up, again, in the interest of time, we are going to ask you to stop. Again, there is another hearing taking place in this room. And some of the folks who are participating in this hearing today are a part of that later hearing. So we have to be mindful. First name that we have on the list to speak as a member of.
Standing over here.
Yes, okay. The first person to speak is Kate Kraus. Please make sure that you introduce yourself for the record, and then we will start your time.
Thank you for having me.
Again, introduce yourself first, and then we will let you know when to speak.
Got you. Kate Kraus. Thank you. My name is Kate Kraus. I live in Port Richmond. In my view, PGW should receive $2 million for one feed study, one engineering study. $2 million more could go to an alternative study to explore how PGW could use safer, cheaper, non-gas solutions to heat the homes of Philadelphians. We also need a risk assessment of this LNG project. PGW's Port Richmond LNG tanks are located on a floodplain along the Delaware River, right next to I-95 and a short walk from people's homes. This scenario is extremely risky. LNG leaks are often catastrophic. We need to know that what the specific risks are for this plan, how likely they are, and how severe. We shouldn't have to guess. If a risk assessment isn't included in the environmental study, it must be conducted separately. PGW is obviously a city-owned utility. We also think it should stop spending money on gas lobbyists and gas lobby dues that fight electrification. PGW should exit trade lobbies altogether. Pennsylvania is 49th out of 50th in developing renewable energy, and this gas lobbying that PGW is paying for is a major reason for this. We also think that PGW should stop spending money on marketing. The utility company has a gas monopoly in Philadelphia, and its marketing just greenwashes gas, which is nothing like clean. I would just add that PGW again failed to alert Port Richmond neighbors about the existence of today's meeting for the fourth time that I've been tracking, probably many more, according to some of the older neighbors that I've been talking to. They are very angry that they did not get the word about this meeting, and they're very angry about the timing of it, which is obviously in the middle of a work day. We understood that the deadline for written comment was 9 a.m. today, not 5 p.m. yesterday. So you may have received comment, and I hope that you will accept it and consider it between yesterday.
We will
and this day.
accept it.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you very much. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Patrick Houston. Again, introduce yourself, and then we will tell you when you can begin to speak. We want to make sure everybody gets their full 3 minutes and not have their introduction take away from that 3 minutes.
May I just ask one question on process before jumping in? And if the commission has time to answer, great. If not, fine.
Go ahead.
Okay, appreciate it. Are you all able, there's one thing the commission did last round for the capital budget. They put a lot of information on the website about it. Is that possible to do for the operating budget too?
That all
is the
has already
timeline
been
between now and
posted.
August 11th?
That all has already been posted on the website. Everything that has been developed as a part of this proceeding to date has been posted on the website.
Wonderful.
There is nothing else. PGW's complete operating budget filing, all of the questions that were posed by the hearing examiners and the public advocate, all of PGW's responses. I think the only thing that has not been posted to date was the testimony that was presented by Mr. Morgan, and we will get that posted. But everything else from this proceeding is already on the website.
Fantastic. And to clarify, maybe this is there too. I'm asking also about not just the substantive things that have been posted, but the timeline between now and when the final decision is made by the commission. Do you know if those things are around, like when the briefs are due?
We can share that, but I can tell you, as was noted earlier, briefs are due July 1st. The commission meeting, which has been posted for a year, is August 11th, and that is where final action is taking place.
Thank you. I won't take any more of the other time, but Patrick Houston. Okay, thank you. My name is Patrick Houston. I'm with the Here for Climate Justice Coalition and testifying on my own behalf today. Thank you for this opportunity to give public testimony. My testimony is particularly focused on using funds from the operating budget to figure out how we can continue to plan for more safe, sustainable, and affordable approaches for meeting peak demand in the future. So yes, we all know that the Gas Commission decided not, and my testimony is particularly speaking to the Gas Commission. So we know that the Gas Commission decided not to approve the funding in fiscal year 2027, the capital budget for fiscal year 2027 for the LNG plant in Port Richmond, and instead has called for the environmental and the engineering assessments. Definitely commend this decision by the commission to look more carefully before making such a massive investment. But there's still I still hold a fundamental concern here about what the future looks like around this plant that the community has expressed a lot of concern about. Many of us as advocates, we've asked for risk assessments around this plant during the capital budget process. I know this is the operating budget process. We've asked for more transparency in public communication. We've asked for energy development that actually aligns with the city's climate goals and especially the affordability needs of so many low-income Philadelphians. And so to this point, I'm still unclear if and how the commission is truly planning to hold PGW to account for this. Particularly, one of the things that we've asked for was an alternative study. And to my mind, this seems like it could be one of the ways that we can most look at alternative approaches and alternatives in the name. So I asked the commission to direct PGW to conduct an alternative study now and to use funds in the operating budget to do so. And so I'm continuing that ask from some of my testimony before in the past. What could this look like? I mean, I imagine that an alternative study could look at what is the potential for energy efficiency measures, like increased demand side management investments to help reduce peak demand. You know, PGW has its Home Energy Sense, these other programs. What happens if you scale those up? What happens if we can invest in additional clean energy pilots, larger pilots, more pilots like thermal energy network pilots to decrease demand and help us, or at least help us reveal alternative paths? What is the capacity of the city's other existing LNG facility? And to what extent could it, coupled with other energy efficiency and clean energy endeavors, help satisfy peak demand? And then also, what would be the cost? And then when you put all this together, what would be the cost estimates of these alternatives? Okay, I'll wrap up. And how do they compare to the projected cost, at least the previously projected cost at $182 million for the plant? So really want to push,
Mr. Houston,
I'm just going to, if I can just wrap up here, I'll be very brief.
if you want to leave your written testimony, we'll consider what you have in writing.
Okay,
Yeah, again, we're trying to be mindful of everyone's time here. So I can't, let's give you more time than everybody else is getting. If you
Okay.
want to submit it in writing, we will be happy to accept it after the fact if you want to clean it up, and submit it to us before the end of the day.
thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Emily Davis. Again, please state your name and then we will let you know when you can begin to actually get into your comments.
My name is Emily Davis. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. As you know, budgets provide a map of what an organization plans to do over a given time. This operating budget does not provide any resources to continue the work on the geothermal network. 4 years ago, $500,000 was included in the operating budget for a feasibility study for the geothermal network. While we understand the study is finally complete, the report has not been made public. At the same time, the low carbon pathways report has not been made public. Please include funding to construct this geothermal network project in the FY 2027 operating budget. When fully implemented, the result will be 2 public buildings with clean, low-cost heating and cooling, and a school that might not have to close during periods of extreme heat, and perhaps be able to provide year-round services to its community. Please provide data about the cost. It will also provide data about the cost of operating and the comfort provided.
Thank you. Next, we have Karen Melton.
My name is Karen Melton.
Okay.
Thank you. So I've heard PGW speak many times today about their efforts to be fiscally responsible. And I understand that the main purpose of the Port Richmond plant is to address peak demand. But the only solution PGW is considering is a LNG plant twice the size of the one they already have that, as I understand it, already produces more LNG than is needed currently to meet peak demand. And of course, we expect that gas demand is going to continue to go down. So I think you should be spending some of this money trying to figure out what are possible alternatives to LNG. There have to be other ways to address peak demand than just building a bigger LNG plant. So that's my main comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mitch Channon.
Hi, Mitch Channon, PGW ratepayer, Northeast Philly resident. Am I close enough to the, okay,
Yes.
great. So thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I don't want to repeat too much of what's been said. Like many of my fellow residents, I want to make sure that everyone has affordable and reliable heat and clean air and a livable climate. And I don't think that the proposed operating budget is moving us in the right direction in terms of those values. Similar to what other folks said, I believe that we need a study to evaluate potential alternatives to the proposed LNG plant. I don't understand why money is being allocated for a FEED study when, to my mind, the need for the plant, certainly for a plant of that size and capacity, has actually not been demonstrated. Echoing a little bit what other folks have said, it's striking to me that PGW is seeking funds for a long-term capital investment designed to last for decades with no long-term demand forecast. We're in the middle of a dramatic energy transition. Gas consumption is peaking and beginning to decline in many countries across the world. That will be the case in the United States. Gas demand is already declining in Philadelphia, and this budget, the FEED study, all the proposals around LNG do not account for that whatsoever. Like other folks have said, I think we should be evaluating the potential for other measures, like maybe expanding the LIRE program to serve more households and other weatherization measures to reduce the need for additional fuel in the winter. I'd like to see actually as the Gas Commission fund and supervise an alternative study rather than PGW being in charge of it. The last, maybe one other thing I'll add is it's also striking to me that PGW is currently funding and supervising this low carbon pathways report, which is supposed to be planning for the long-term future of our utility. And yet there's no integration with that planning project and these capital investments. And I don't understand that whatsoever. I hope that the low carbon pathways report will be addressing some of the questions that I named. How do we make sure people have affordable and reliable heat on the coldest days? If it's not doing that, please ask the contractor to include that and or make sure those questions are addressed in an alternative study. The low carbon pathways should not just be an empty intellectual exercise, but should actually be used to plan for the affordable, reliable, safe energy that we all need. The last thing that I'll say is if PGW thinks that the capacity of the plant doesn't matter because you can just keep selling gas off system indefinitely, that assumption also needs to be checked through these reports. Gas demand is peaking, will be peaking in the United States as well. Betting that we can just sell off system through trucks indefinitely to whoever is not a good bet, given that the energy transition is now happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are next going to turn to comments from virtual participants. Again, if you already submitted a written comments, please refrain from raising your hand to offer a comment. For everything else, if you would please raise your hand in the chat to let us know that you want to speak, and our internal auditor and IT guru, Timothy Murtha, will call your name in the order that they appear. We will then, as we did with the in-person participants, ask you to introduce yourself, and then we will start your time. Again, you will have 3 minutes in which to speak.
Okay, the first person to speak virtually is Linnea Bond.
Okay, Ms.
Hi.
Bond, hi, if you could just introduce yourself and then we'll let you know when you can begin to speak.
My name is Linnea Bond. I am a Philadelphia PGW ratepayer, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and Physicians for Social Responsibility Pennsylvania.
You can start.
I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made. I thought they, especially Mitch Shannon's comments were really well made, and Kate Kraus. I want to emphasize that rather than doing 2 feed studies, if it's important enough for PGW to want 2 studies, why is an alternative not important enough for 1 study? I think we should, since 2 years ago, PGW requested $2 million to study what they would need for a new LNG facility, and now they want $4 million for that same work for 2 studies. As they said, they should get $2 million for the feed study, and $2 million should go to an alternative study. We can't bet against our own goals as a city. We need to try to figure out how to decrease gas use rather than betting on selling more LNG to save us from the economic issue of declining gas that we're experiencing, because gas causes climate change. It causes a lot of health issues. We need to stop spending money in the budget on gas lobbies that fight electrification. We should exit trade lobbies. Although that would only save us a couple $100,000, that's still money that ratepayers are spending that should go to our own interests rather than gas lobby interests. They're fighting electrification. It's a waste of our money. We need to stop spending money on marketing. PGW has a gas monopoly in Philly, and without a plan to transition, more gas customers means more gas. Plus, PGW's marketing greenwashes gas and says it's clean, and it's not clean. Not only is methane responsible for a huge amount of climate change, so is it also produces CO2. It cannot be considered clean. 12% of childhood asthma can be attributed to gas stoves. And finally, the Gas Commission should be more specific about what it needs in the environmental study, which of course was covered by the public advocate. For example, the cumulative impact of a facility on the health of the surrounding area combined with other nearby facilities. That should be part of an environmental study, and it should include a comparison of the health and environmental impact of electrifying versus gas powering infrastructure that would be needed for an LNG facility, like a nitrogen compressor and a regeneration heater. I assume that PGW is imagining these are going to be
30 seconds.
large pieces of gas infrastructure, and instead of gas infrastructure, if we are going to build an LNG facility, those should be electrified, which brings us back to the problem of we need to move away from gas. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second person is Emily Abendroth.
Yes,
Ms. Abendroth, if you can just introduce yourself, and then again, we'll start your time.
My name is Emily Abendroth. I'm the program manager for Philly Climate Works and a member of the Here for the Climate Justice Coalition, but I'm speaking today on my own behalf.
Time.
Okay. In addition to the things I just said, I'm also a PGW. I have been a PGW customer for almost 25 years, but in the past 6 months, I finished electrifying my home and moved off the gas system. In that sense, I am part of the trend of declining gas demand that will only continue to grow. On May 12th, the Philadelphia Gas Commission rejected, for at least at this time, the $182 million request for an LNG plant in Port Richmond, noting that they required both more information on the nature of this facility and the necessity of this expenditure. I want to commend that decision. And like many others here today, I want to encourage that some of this money that is being allotted for feed studies instead be directed at an alternative pathways study. That is part of the additional information that indeed the Gas Commission itself acknowledged needed to be generated. So like Linnea Bond has said, rather than multiple feed studies, I believe an alternative path study should be a part of this operating budget for the upcoming year. Further, I also want to echo the clear necessity for the Gas Commission itself to give PGW greater clarification and clearer guidance from the commission as to the standards and expectations from the environmental study component. Overall, while I want to celebrate the recent decision on the part of the Gas Commission, I also just want to name that it is the task of this Gas Commission to hold PGW as a municipally owned facility to adhere to the city's climate goals, and that we cannot anticipate that PGW will do that without an insistence from this body. So I'm respectfully requesting that the Gas Commission please provide that insistence, both in the form of a clearly delineated alternative pathways study that is commissioned by the Gas Commission itself, and by much, much clearer guidelines on what the environmental studies must necessarily contain. And basically that's all. Also advocating for an alternative pathway study. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Seeing no more hands raised, we will move to wrapping things up. Turning first to the review process schedule. Briefs again are due July 1st. The hearing examiner's recommended decision will be issued on July 10th, with action by the Gas Commission to take place at its previously advertised August commission meeting, so August 11th. Is there any, and we'll go over the TR requests once we get through this. Are there any comments from the advocate on the review schedule at this juncture?
No further comments. Thank you.
Okay, from PGW.
Nothing further.
Okay, so then turning next to the TR responses, the transcript responses, we have transcript response number 1 directed to the Gas Commission. And again, we will have more appropriate phrasing when these actually get sent out. But for now, in general, it is clarification on the parameters and standards of the environmental study to be provided by close of business this coming Friday, the 26th. TR2 directed to PGW, update PGW's responses to PAOB1 through May 2026 in an Excel spreadsheet format. And then TR3 is going to be directed to PGW and the public advocate, provide a schedule setting forth all adjustments to the proposed FY27 operating budget that you believe are supported by the record at this point, including a brief narrative describing each that references the record support, as well as a calculation showing the impact of each adjustment on the budget. Does the advocate agree with that listing of the 3 TR requests?
I think so. I'm sorry. The last one was the one that
the standard
one. Yes,
yeah.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
And the due date for that, I hadn't thought that through. I'd love to say Monday, but it sounds like it's Friday.
Well, the briefs are due. Would this coming Monday be satisfactory to both sides? With the briefs being due July 1.
If the briefs could be due July 2nd, we will make that request, but I know it might fall on deaf ears.
Going into the holiday, we can be generous and give you until the 2nd.
Go that way. We're going into the holiday, so no.
To be realistic, it's going into the holiday weekend, so we can adjust the schedule to allow for July 2nd for the briefs to be due. TR responses due by close of business on Monday. But again, we will endeavor to have the commission's response by close of business Friday. Is there anything else from the advocate at this point?
Nothing further.
And from PGW?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That convenes this public hearing in PGW's FY27 operating budget.